So this is class 142 on the golden doves. Um, we're page 79, and we were studying about negative knowledge of God. Negative knowledge of God is the first step to true knowledge of whatever it is we can know. Right? So there is something we can know, but whatever that something is, it's called epiphatic knowledge, and that's the subject of another book called Homo Mysticus. But the first step towards epiphatic knowledge is negative knowledge, right? So we're dealing with that. So we're page 79. Whatever positive likeness may be drawn between God and his creatures rests on the basis of semiotics, not ma'ana. So so when we try to compare God to man. So for example, we'll use certain attributes that one could use for man. So again, we say he's Rahum, or he's Hanun, right? Or he's Erech Hapayim. Erech Hapayim is a good example. Erech Hapayim means long patience, right? He doesn't get angry easily. Why would God get angry in the first place, right? And God has perfect knowledge, and nothing should trigger, nothing does trigger God or impact upon God's feelings to the extent that God has feelings. Even that's incorrect to say, right? So when we're talking about some sort of similarity between God and individuals, right? Whatever positive likeness may be drawn between God and his creatures rests on the basis of semiotics, not ma'ana. It's purely semiotic in the sense that it's a type of mashal, right? And you can't take the deeper meaning, for example, of Erech Hapayim and say, he's Erech Hapayim. So now when we go deeply into Erech Hapayim, so it means he wants to get angry, but he doesn't. He controls himself, right? That's the ma'ana of Erech Hapayim, so to speak. And of course, that's a ludicrous explanation. That would be a ludicrous application of the meaning of Erech Hapayim to God. So Erech Hapayim, we take it at the semiotic level, long patience. What does that mean? So it's not the usual meaning of Erech Hapayim. I'm just looking for a moment. Right. Okay. So let's continue. And now we're going to have a quote directly from Harambam. Again, this is in the Moreh Nebuchim. Those attributes applying to him, there is nothing in common between their ma'ana and the ma'ana which is known to us. So I gave the example of Erech Hapayim. The minute you say somebody's Erech Hapayim, you're saying he would normally get angry, but he kind of controls himself. He doesn't get angry. He calms himself down, and he has patience, right? None of that applies to God, right? In no manner is there any ontological association at all, in any way, epistemological, right? So Harambam is very clear that there is no common denominator between God and man. So even when we talk about feelings and certain character traits and personality, and we use words that we would apply to man, and then we apply it to God to describe particular personality traits. Those words are just meant at the semiotic, at the superficial semiotic level. Of course, there's something very deep there, but that's the ma'ana, that deep thing, is not the regular ma'ana of the word, right? You see what I'm saying? So we say it's at the semiotic level. My father means to say is, don't apply the regular ma'ana of the word Erech Hapayim to understanding what Erech Hapayim means in the context of God. You can apply it to man, of course, right? You can apply it to God. So my father says it, you can understand it at the semiotic level. What he means to say is that every word has a semantic field. and the semantic field includes and encompasses various ma'anas, assuming it's a homonym, a word with several meanings. Let's say it's a word with one meaning. So there's a particular ma'ana to the word, right? So what my father means here is that there is no ma'ana. He means the regular ma'ana of the word doesn't apply. So therefore, the word becomes a dalal. It becomes a sign for something outside the regular semantic field of that word. You understand? That's the meaning here. It's really deep and difficult to understand. Okay, so in no manner, again, this is Harambam, in a quote from the Moreh, in no manner is there any ontological association at all, in any way, epistemological. Their association, however, is only in the ism. Now remember, on page 74, we were discussing the word ism. So I'm just reading from page 74. It is important to note that the ism is never a sign expressing ma'ana. Ma'ana can never be expressed by a sign. Rather, it is indicated by a dalala, commonly translated sign, but actually meaning a gesture pointing to a thing or to a direction, a signal, a signpost. Right? So the idea of ism is almost the idea of ism is almost like a word used at its regular lexical dictionary meaning, right? The idea of ism is to emphasize the dictionary or lexical meaning of the word, right? So their association, however, is only in the ism. Again, in the sense that we're just using, for example, Raglei Hashem. There's no relationship between our raglaim, which help support us, right? And we need the raglaim to kind of like stand, and the Raglei Hashem, right? So the ma'ana of raglaim, as it applies to man, is irrelevant in the case of God. So yes, we use the word Raglei Hashem, but it means that ma'ana, as applied to God, is something completely different. That's why we say it. We only mean it in the ism level. Knowledge of God is attained through a negation of ma'ana wrongly thought to apply to Him, right? So, for example, when you say Raglei Hashem, and now you think about it, yeah, there is nothing that can support God, because God is the ultimate creator, the only creator, and everything else is a creation. So nothing supports Him; He supports everything. So you understand? So we automatically reject the ma'ana of raglaim as applied to God. Thus, and this is my father now, thus, whereas negation of ma'ana results in a positive knowledge of God, a positive assertion of divine attributes results in bewilderment. So, when you begin to negate things from God, let's give another example, another negation, ha'el gadol. So you realize that God doesn't occupy space. So what do we mean when we say He's big? He doesn't occupy space. There's the concept of size. It's like saying the color red smells good. I mean, it's an irrelevant category, right? Right? So whereas negation of mana results in positive knowledge, so you begin to understand something about God. Once you negate size from God, you begin to understand something about God. A positive assertion of divine attributes results in bewilderment. And if you actually say, no, raglaim, the ma'ana of raglaim means something that supports a person. Let me apply that to God. Okay, because it says raglaim, this must be what it's saying. So there's something that supports God. So you become bewildered, you become navach. Well, it's not possible, because God is a creator, but it says Raglei Hashem. Right? So it becomes bewildering. You become navoch. That's why Harambam says, no, this is not the correct analysis. Negation of ma'ana must be conceptual. Negation of ma'ana must be conceptual. That's really important. What Harambam says is, That it's not to say, oh, I have negative knowledge of God. Ha'el gadol doesn't mean gadol. Like negative, it means he's not small. Hagibol doesn't mean he's powerful, it means he's not weak. You're just saying words, okay? You're just saying words. Hanambam says you need to conceptualize it. Let me just check. I'm going to get a book by Jack Derrida. Hold on. I apologize. My apologies, but I think there's something here. The book of grammatology. Right. Right. I'm just gonna. This is actually from Hegel, but it applies to what Hanambam is saying. But I believe some of these philosophers must have read Hanambam, because Hanambam was acknowledged as a great philosopher, right? Even though I don't consider him a philosopher, because philosophy has to do with ideas, and we have to do Jewish thinking is about words, right? But okay, it's not the point now. So, what did Hanambam say? Negation of ma'ana must be conceptual. You have to think about it. Don't just say, oh, he's not gadol. By gadol it means he's not katan. By gibor it means he's not halash. That's silly. That's nothing. You're just saying words. You have to conceptualize it, right? It requires proof. I'm reading My Father's Golden Doves, not Jack Derrida or Hegel. It requires proof. It cannot be affected at the verbal level, right? So you don't just say, oh, God doesn't have raglaim. Okay, very nice. I mean, Mabruk, we know that, right? So what do you know about God? You know absolutely nothing. You know the same about God you knew before you read the Pasuk, Laglei Hashem, and you know the same about God that you knew before you made this negative knowledge, right? You didn't conceptualize anything. That's what it means. It requires proof. By negating the ism of an accident, as accident means like something happening to, like an adjective, right? Like by Ya'avor, God is over, right? So by negating the ism of an accident as an attribute of God, one does not negate its ma'ana, right? So just saying erech hapayim means that he doesn't get angry. Okay, so you're negating the ism of an accident as an attribute. One does not negate its mana. Negation must be accomplished at the conceptual level. You have to conceptualize why it is that the mana of erech hapayim can't apply to God. You need to conceptualize that. I just want to read to you what Hegel says. What is familiarly known is not properly known. It's so good. Oh yeah, I know this. Yeah, I know this. Yeah, negative theology. Yeah, I remember hearing Chacham Paul speaking about negative theology. Yeah, I get that. You know nothing. You actually know zero. In fact, you're worse than zero because you think you know something when you actually know zero, right? It's not enough to just say, oh, I heard this, or negative theology. Yeah, negative theology. You have to go through the process. Something that's familiar is no longer known, right? When engaged in the process, this is Hegel, when engaged in the process of knowing, it is the commonest form of self-deception and a deception of other people as well to assume something to be familiar and to let it pass. Gefallen zu lassen. I don't know German, I'm making up this thing. On that very account, right? Knowledge of that sort, with all its talking around it, never gets from the spot. You never accomplish it. Negative theology. They do this all the time. You have so many pseudo-intellectuals who supposedly, they're the intellectuals in the community. They're just parrots. They're just saying sounds and words without actually stopping to think. You never get from the spot, but has no idea that this is the case. As they're parroting these words, they're in the same spot they always were, and they never realize that they haven't moved an inch forward. To display an idea in its original elements means returning upon its moments, right? But it's no I'm against Daf Yomi. I'm just, it's wonderful culturally. It's nice that we have Daf Yomi. I don't mean I'm against people studying Gemara Chas v'Shalom. But this whole idea of, the Tanur Banan, the Tanya, Kashya, there's a Kushya, there's an answer, okay, let's go on, let's go. Wait, we have another 5 minutes of Daf Yomi. Okay, let's finish it. Bemet. Is that studying Gemara? That's studying Gemara, but that's not really studying Gemara. Okay? My own humble opinion, again, I think as a cultural thing, it's wonderful. Keep it up, right? So negation must be accomplished at the conceptual level. That's what my father's saying from Harambam, of course. And now we're quoting Harambam. In light of this explanation, you will know that someone who does not know the proof for the negation of a ma'ana is more deficient in his perception of God and farther away from knowing him than another to whom it was proven that such a ma'ana is inapplicable to him. Right? A person who went through the mental process, it's not familiar. I really want to understand how is it that God is not really gadol in the sense of size. So you go through the process. Well, there was no space before God created space, so God doesn't exist in the realm of the space. What does that even mean? You have to conceptualize it. I mean, the words are not enough. And then, okay, God doesn't exist, so God created space. So that creation is subject to him. It doesn't subject him. So he couldn't possibly exist within it. Right? That's kind of the process you're going through. Every single time, by the way. Right? Therefore, the fewer the negations, the greater the deficiency in perception, as was explained at the beginning of this chapter. Right? So if you're not going through this process, through this mental, if all you say is negative theology, mabruk to you, but you know nothing. But if you actually go through the process, every time you go through the process, for another attribute, we dealt with size. For another attribute, we dealt with erech hapayim, and so on, you have greater and greater knowledge of him. However, whoever applies to him a positive attribute knows nothing of him except the name and abstract. People have no knowledge of God. They say God is love. God is love. Like techila, like just enough. People wake up. You don't know what you're talking about. All these emotional attributes. God is suffering. God is it's just paganism. Stop with the paganism. Okay? God's, whatever it means, there's a pasuk that says, Imo anochi besara. Whatever Imo anochi besara means, doesn't mean he's suffering. Right? He doesn't exist in the temporal, in the timeline, right? He doesn't exist temporally. How can he possibly be suffering at the current state of affairs? So what does it mean? Okay, I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything. It says, Vait asev el libo. When God looks at Dor HaMabul, Vait asev el libo. What does that mean? So if all he says God is suffering, okay, then you really don't understand anything, right? So the point is, the people who just take these positive attributes and they turn it into a whole pseudo religion, they know nothing about God. When people sing Hakadosh Baruch Hu Anachnu Ohavim Otcha, oh man, God is sitting up there. These people really love me. I mean, that's sacrilegious. It's just sacrilegious. How can you sing to God? God, Dolly, how we love you, our dear old Dolly. It's ludicrous. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu Anachnu Ohavim Otcha. What? God doesn't know my feelings. God doesn't know how I feel. God, and you're telling God, I love you. What do you even mean by that? What do you mean when you're all singing in a wedding? I love you. What does that mean? Do you even understand what that means? How can you love God? You don't even know God. You know nothing about him. There's a word God. Kudsha berichu. So the whole thing is, man, people always say, why the Mashiach didn't come. To who? To whom is he supposed to come? To people who sing HaKadosh Baruch Hu Anachnu Ohavim Otcha? All right. I'm sorry. Just has to be said. Right. Likewise, the thing that he imagines as the referent of the ism is a non-existent mana, fictitious and false. Of course, in your Dimayon, we have feelings of love, so God must have feelings of love. Does he love me? Do I love him? Am I in love? Is he? Right? So it's all Dimayon, right? So you have this thing that you imagine of this ism, right? And you apply it to God. So God is Erech Hapayim, so you must really love me. I mean, maybe he does, but not in the sense that you're using the word love, right? So what does that mean? It means something. But not what you think it means, because you never went through the mental process of understanding what does it mean that God is Erech Apayim. What does it mean that God is Rahum? What does it mean that God is Hanun? How do any of these things make sense in the context of God? So if you didn't go through the process, you can't answer the question. If you can't answer the question, you know nothing about God. It is as if you had applied that ism to a non-existent mana, since in reality there is no such thing. So if you say God is Gadol, and you just, not thinking about it, then the whole thing is a fiction. Then it's literally a fiction, right? So you need to study and understand and go through this process.